Selamat sore, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Initiation, the second part of our trilogy into the cosmos, into the cosmology of life. Hello, everybody online. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us. And for everybody online, let us know if there's any trouble with audio, or if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Maybe put them through in the chat, and we'll love to keep you as involved as possible in the process today. Once again, for those who we haven't met, my name's Tjok Gde Kertyasa, and it's a deep honor and pleasure to be here in my family home in Ibah with Dr. Neale, my dear friend, colleague, and fellow traveler on this journey we call life in this cosmology. So without further ado, I'd like to open the dialogue, open the discussion. And I'd like to hand the mic to you, Miles, to start off this, start the initiation.
Thank you. And thank you for everybody now in the future that comes online. You have to have a multi-dimensional perspective these days, I think, connecting with people. So those of you that are here live, those that are on the live stream, and then also the digital intersections in the future. So this is an important time that we're living in. I've been having this dialogue with Tjok Gde for several years now in preparation for this time that we're living in right now. And so it's a great pleasure for me to have the dialogue public and to engage you in these kinds of thematic contemplations. I think in a way we're all swimming in the same ocean. We're all feeling the same kinds of emotions. And, you know, for the past 25 years or so, Tjok Gde and I've had the honor of being students of very long-lasting wisdom traditions that have something to say about the time that we're living in right now. And it's a little bit of a matrix that we've combined together, because Tjok Gde's specialty intersect with mine in very, I think, very interesting ways. You know, he brings the cosmology from the Hindu tantric, Balinese tantric side. My interest in astrology is very new. In a way, only a few years old. I consider myself a neophyte, but in a way, astrology has always been part of the old wisdom traditions because it has such a precise map of where we are. It gives us the wide angle view, the largest wide angle bird's eye view of where we are if we wanted to locate ourselves in a GPS system in time and place right now on the planet. The astrology has always given us a lot of really essential and important information that some of the other disciplines can't provide. But then there's also the introspective or contemplative map. Tjok Gde is a practitioner of alchemy. He's also an adherent to Steiner's model. I love Jung. I also practice psychotherapy. I come from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So I just think there's a very interesting matrix of different kinds of disciplines that we're weaving together. But the big question really is, where are we in time and space? What is it that we're experiencing culturally? What is it that we're experiencing personally? And more importantly, how do we meet this moment in the most optimal, optimistic, meaningful way possible? And, you know, both of us like to listen to Pam Gregory, she's a famous astrologer on YouTube, and she's always with that British accent, very, very astute. But one nice thing about her personality is she doesn't really succumb to the fear channel and the fear mongering. She also talks about the astrology just plain as day, just exactly how it is, matter of fact. But she's very good on keeping us buoyant and keeping our sense of alignment in a good vibrational setting. So I think that's also what good dialogues do. Yeah. I think any one of us at any moment our nervous systems can tank, and our nervous systems can collapse. And so co-regulation is also one of the archetypes. For me, I've been in a silo in my silly little psychotherapy block office in Manhattan for almost 20 years. You've been down there in your little office too. And the time that we're living in is really about partnership. It's about collaboration. It's about new systems coming online at a local level and networking together. So one of the archetypes of the old world is the pyramid scheme, where there's a guru on top and the rest of us are sort of subservient. And now we're transitioning into a new time, which is really some of the transition between Piscean and Aquarian age, which is very much emblematic of more of a mandala, illustrated by things like the internet, blockchain, small nodes of people, ordinary people like all of us, recognizing our inherent value and then linking together, making networks. And sort of that empowerment, that grassroots empowerment. So I like those kind of themes. I like Pam's energy. I find your energy really, I always feel very safe with you. And you've done work with me. I've done work with you. So I think just the spirit of that kind of collaboration is really the direction that we're heading. So thank you, Tjok Gde. Thank you for these opportunities. I think one of the things I want to do is just riff for 20 minutes or so on the sort of map that we've selected to dissect or do a sort of an analysis on where we are. We've cut it into three pieces according to Joseph Campbell's monomyth, which is the departure, the initiation, and the return. It's based on mythology. What Joseph Campbell was very good at doing is understanding in all the stories that we've ever told in every epoch, in every culture, has something to do with a hero that undergoes this sort of tripartite or three, sort of a trilogy, as you said, of main phases. Of course, there are several subsequence in there, but the main sort of thrust is that there's a kind of departure act, there's an act of initiation, and there's an act of return. And if I were to ask you how those three, that holy trinity shows up in alchemy, you could very elegantly talk us through that. And if we looked at it in Hinduism and Tantra, it would be there too. It's definitely there in the Tibetan tradition with a conscious death, what they call a bardo, a liminal phase, where the archetype of the deity arises, and then the rebirth. So whatever way you cut it, beautiful, beautiful things are cut into threes. Let me just return a little bit to the departure so that we have some sort of, especially for people that may have not been there last week or last time we met, and it would have been last year.
Yes, it was.
And now we're 2025, and apparently 2025 is a very, very big year. And I'll leave it up to Tjok to really spell that out in terms of astrological terms. But last time I spoke in terms of what is called the Great Year, which is held the largest long cycle calendar that is held by most spiritual cultures on the planet, whether it be the Mayans or the Tibetans or the Hindu yoga system, the Vedic system, in Bali also. 25,000 year approximately.
Cycles.
So this long cycle lasts approximately 25,000 years. It's timed with the precession of the equinoxes. You could think about it as a great cosmic clock that makes a descent into a dark period and makes a rotation or a transition and a rising or ascending into a light period. Some people talk about it in terms of a binary star system, which is interesting, that our sun is actually in dialogue with a hidden sister star, and that as these two rotate, the centrifugal force or the gravitational pull spits them back out in a figure eight, and as they get closer, it affects our consciousness differently. And as the sun and its sister star migrates at a distance, it affects consciousness negatively. And so what we see are civilization rise and fall, and then we see massive epochs of what we would call the Satya Yuga, kind of an age of light, an age of truth, where beings' lifespans last long, vast, much longer than we can imagine. Health is just a given. longevity is a given, incredible cities, powers of the mind, incredible technologies. And then something happens as the twin pair sort of dance apart or grow apart. There is the descent into a darker age, and lifespan shrinks, greed, malice, hatred, discontent, discord, all of that starts to come to the surface. We forget the stars. We forget our sacred books. We forget our own powers. We forget who we are. We become dominated by materialism. We live for just this life. We live for simple pleasures. We don't recognize the spark of divinity in each of us, and this spells the beginning of the dark age, where there's strife and war and sort of impoverished sensibilities. And then just by the turning of the age, and just like a breath of in and out breath and inhalation and exhalation, the tide giving way, a transition naturally happens and we ebb and flow. The great thing about sacred wisdom cultures is they knew that. And when you know that, even that you don't mistake the tree for the forest, even though you can see the symptoms that are arising around you, you have your vision on the long dance, and you know how to prepare. You know how to safeguard your sacred wisdom. You know, you don't lose the traditions that know what the temples are for. You don't lose, you know, your sense of governance based on ethics. You have these little pockets of culture, even in the dark age, that are the wisdom keepers. Yeah. And when I came to Bali, I was looking for you and your dad. Welcome. And because I wanted to understand the sacred tradition on this island by someone who was through and through holding it with honor and integrity, because Bali is considered one of these last bastions. Yeah. There are a few strongholds here and there. For example, Tibet was one until the invasion. And now the wisdom keepers may not have their own enclave. Now there's just, they preserve the tradition within their own hearts. So they may have migrated to Canada or the United States or to Nepal. But the fact of the matter is during these more crisis-like times, there are these rare objects of refuge, places where the knowledge, the good nervous system, the one where you go for refuge when your nervous system is tanking, that's going to co-regulate you, the one that's going to give you an idea about the meta map, the large picture, the one that's going to help you understand the archetypal scene, the one that's going to empower you through initiation, the one that's going to help you remember where you are in the long cycle, but also who you really are. So this is if you're anything like me, every once in a while you may be sitting at breakfast, or you may be with one of your kids, or you may be watching the news, or you may be, I don't know, diddly-daddling somewhere and somehow. And it's really important for me to ground these talks in our actual lived experience. If you just look at the world right now, let's say the last 5 years, pandemic and onwards, this is a great period of really intense archetypes. Yeah. The pandemic basically was ushered in January 12, 2020 on a Saturn-Jupiter-Pluto alignment. Yep. Saturn is structure. It's basically all the institutions and the value system that keep a civic society sort of online and networked together. Jupiter is about expansion. Pluto came in to give it a reckoning. Yeah. And so I think those three things, just even as a neophyte person who admires astrology, just looking at those planets in terms of our structural breakdown, a reckoning, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and also in the Book of the Dead of the Egyptians, yeah. There's this motif of is it a balance where is it your heart and a feather are balanced out in the Egyptian one? I'm not sure.
Yeah, Anubis, he measures your heart against a feather, the weights of your heart.
So they have the same description in the Tibetan, the Bardo Todol, the Book of the Dead, which is actually a misnomer. It's the book of liberation through hearing in the between.
Right. I like that better.
And what happens there is that the dying person crosses a threshold, essentially. You leave the elements of the body dissolve. And what is left is the luminous nature of mind that has to confront its karmic projections.
Mm.
And so they come in the form of fierce deities, which seem to be other.
Mm.
And they're terrifying if you have a lot of the residue of a lot of vice. They terrify you, and you have no training, and you can't recognize that it's actually just projections of your own lucidity and your own karmic repercussion.
Mm.
And so the book of the Revelation is the same thing.
Yeah.
What we call apocalypse means revelation.
Mm.
It doesn't mean the end of time, just like in the Mayan calendar in 2020, or I think, or 2012.
Yeah.
It went viral as a time where like there would be like we'd just fall off a precipice.
Yes. Yeah.
But in fact, they were talking about it in terms of this long cycle coming to a transition, like the end of a full cycle. And that was 2012, according to the Mayans. And depending on who you're talking to, people talk about the end of the Kali Yuga right now in the Vedic system. People are definitely dialed into the fact that it's the end of the Piscean age, which is about a 2,160 year period. We're coming to the end of that. That was marked by the birth of Christ.
Mm.
And now is seeing its tail end. And very interestingly, if you just subdivide the span of 2,160 years, the last 400 years or so, the last phase is the rise of science, which is the Antichrist, literally. Not the Antichrist as sort of devil with horns, but what happened 400 years ago in our own history in Western Enlightenment was the end of religion. We have Nietzsche saying God is dead, and we have blood on our hands. He wasn't celebrating.
No.
He was like, look what's going to happen to you. If you jettison yourself from your moorings in some institution that guides moral action and meaning, and also gives you some compass for meaning, what you're left with is a nihilistic. You're left with a nihilistic paradigm, succumbing to sheer materialism.
Yeah.
So this is where we are in that chapter, as a consequence of all the breakthroughs that science have given us, the medicine, the space travel, the information age, all the scientific breakthroughs. There's also the shadow. And I view this as symptoms. When I'm asking us to look around culturally, and I'm also asking us to look at ourselves in the mirror during this period of reckoning, what we see are symptoms. So anybody right now, if you just take notes and you think about the top 3 things that you're seeing, they're predictable. They would have been predictable, and they were in fact predictable. When I was sort of December 2019, I was reading an article by Maurice Fernandez on the upcoming conjunction in 2020. He had written it in 2016. And there he very descriptively describes the undermining of our social fabric, the institutions collapsing, whether they be banking system, our sort of trust in the government. All those sort of cultural bastions that gave us ground, and where we could wake up the next morning knowing how to orient ourselves because they were given. That's quicksand.
Yep.
And I don't know about you. I mean, I voluntarily left the United States in 2021, but I haven't found stable ground since. And I don't know if people feel that, but I've had enough conversations with people where 2020 and the pandemic was like a portal.
Yeah. It was almost like the departure.
It was the departure. and also leading into a great initiation.
Which
There
may be
was
what we're in now.
massive polarization.
Yeah.
People were divided amongst themselves, even family members divided around lines like vax, non-vax,
I like that
political
your mom said
parties.
family mongers. That's a good Freudian slip, that one.
Family mongers.
Mongers, yeah. Yeah.
And I remember saying last time that we met, like I saw people that I would have bet life savings on that they were going to stay together through and through, had massive ruptures.
Yeah.
Divorces, separations, physical breaches.
Yeah.
And all, you must have just had exponential boom of receiving clients with ailments that were not the garden variety elements.
Which continues now.
Which continues now.
I'd say even more.
Even more.
Yeah.
And I don't know, what else, like just casually, other symptoms that are just ubiquitous in your conversations that people are noticing? I mean, you have the weather, unbelievable weather patterns. Real, like what would be considered anomalous.
Yep.
But have become like part of the new landscape. You have the banking collapse, the hyperinflation, and you have the breakdown of science. And what I mean by that is science used to be able to provide ground of certainty, and now we disagree about facts. And there's no way to put your hat or your foot or your cup of tea on anything.
But it's okay, we've got fact checkers now. AI fact checkers. No.
The other day I wrote an article about apocalypse, and I was watching the fires in LA, and I saw an image of the Hollywood sign catch on fire. And I was like, that's an archetype. It reminded me instantly of Notre Dame burning down.
Yeah.
And the sort of end of an era. I mean, the LA is just wasted, like a wasteland, like someone had dropped a nuclear bomb. And I sent it out this, I was using it as a reference point for the end of an era, and I was using it as a reference point that apocalypse is not the end of the world. It's just it's a really deep seeing. You take any one of these things, like banking collapse, like the vax, non-vax, like, the truckers movement in Canada, where their monies were taken away because they weren't allowed to voice their political opinion. You take a look at any of these things and you start looking at them through the lens of symptomology, like a doctor understanding the root cause of the problem. And someone wrote me back and said, well, Miles, did you know that photograph of the Hollywood sign was AI generated?
Ouch.
And then I said, no, but that's also part of the symptoms.
Exactly.
That's also, we may never know for sure what the fuck we're looking at, what we're seeing.
Yeah.
Who's saying what? Did they really say it? Is it AI generated? Is it true? Is it, like we may never know anymore.
Yeah.
And so it was like a double archetype. Not only was it wrong, but it also showed us like we've just gone into this very Neptunian like place where it's like a dream.
Yeah.
Everything
Nebulous.
is like a dream.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a Vedic astrologer who I really like. He's got a podcast called KRS Channel, and he spoke about this exact topic, about this incredible rise of AI and the fact that now with all of this, you can do better than a CGI, than DreamWorks on your phone, He said that's actually it has to do with Rahu, with the north node of the moon, and that its function is actually to make us. It'll be a short period of time, and what's going to happen is everyone's actually going to wake up and just say, "It's all fake. It's all an illusion." This is Rahu is the master of illusions. But he's there to actually allow us to liberate ourselves from that. When all of the gods came together, the sun, Surya, Chandra, the moon, Mangala, Mars, Brihaspati, Jupiter, all of them sat in a circle the only one who actually attained moksha from the God state was Rahu. That's why his symbol is the head cut off. Yeah. And he liberates us from the illusion by showing us the most ridiculous level of illusion. Yeah.
The absurdity.
The absurdity. Yeah. So the prediction is that that will actually cause us to go back to analog filming, and that will be meaningful, that eventually you know, all these CGI films, all this AI will actually sort of just eat itself up. And that will actually I mean, you know, I personally still favor a film photo.
It's funny you mentioned that, because
Yeah.
they were talking about an uptick in people returning to bookstores
Yep.
for two reasons. Not just to have an actual tangible paper book in their hands, but also the sense of being in community with live people.
Yeah.
Because of so much online separation, which gives the illusion of being connected, but in a way, it's kind of a pseudo connection.
Yeah.
It's not a proper stand-in for like me being able to hug you or have a cup of tea or have a meal.
Yeah.
So I like what you say about Rahu, because it's interesting, like the fact that one illusion could be used to highlight that it's all an illusion.
Yeah.
Just as we're being pulled deeper and deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. So last session was about departure. Departure usually involves us hearing an inner voice that's saying, I can't stay here any longer. It's called the call to adventure. Every hero myth, it's the Luke Skywalker that, you know, gets the message from R2-D2 that someone's in help or someone's in need of help. In the Matrix, you know, it's the visitation of Morpheus and Trinity to an already sort of uncomfortable Neo. There's something, Neale says it really beautifully. I love it. He says there's a thorn in the mind. That we can't stay here like this. We're at a tipping point. We can't, I mean, here in Bali, the pollution, for example, you know, what is undoubtedly one of the spiritual refuges of the planet, ironically, is also being engulfed by the 1-2 punch of consumerism and industrialization. The last 400 years that breed this Antichrist archetype has now come full circle to sort of engulf this last bastion. And there's that moment where the hero is beginning to awaken, like, I can't breathe here, I can't stay here, I can't live like this. Something has got to change. And then there's also the archetype of the refusal of the call. It can't be me. I don't have what it takes. I can't leave New York. I can't leave my network. I can't leave my income. I can't leave the security blanket of my health insurance. I can't, whatever it is, whatever it is. I can't face my own fear. And then there is eventually something that pushes us past. It's called crossing the threshold. There's something that magnifies the will to leave, that pushes us past the fear. And I love this because I think I talked about it. It's very true to my own experience. I'd like to know from you and anybody listening to think about this. I raised it in the last discussion, but this conundrum between security and freedom. We've grown accustomed to a kind of security. It may come in the corporate job. It may come in the benefits package. It may come from being connected to family in, you know, maybe your family ancestral home, or there are all these inputs on your identity that make you who you are. People recognize you for this thing that you do. It becomes over time a kind of salt pillar, becomes reified and hard to move. And in a way, it's what we take to be us. And then the tectonic plates underneath start shifting and we become terrified because we've grown accustomed to all these inputs feeding our sense of identity and feeding our basic needs. And it's sort of terrifying to imagine uprooting. But there is a deeper longing, I think, in sensitive human beings that they want to be free. They also want to be able to move into new territory, move into new horizons, have new kinds of experiences, allow their identity to dissolve so that it can be reconstituted. That I think is what I would call an archetypal call of the soul. There's a famous alchemical motto, Solve et Coagula, which as an alchemist sitting here, you should explain. And then I'll come back to me.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? You know, when we create a spagyric tincture in alchemy, and you know, I started my journey into alchemy through practical plant alchemy. It's laboratory style alchemy. But all of the symbolism is the same as for psychological alchemy and spiritual alchemy. We basically go through a stage where we take a plant and we separate the plant into three parts. Again, the Trinity, the Holy Trinity, the Trimurti. We separate the soul, the spirit, and the body. And the fact that you can demonstrate this materially, you can demonstrate on every level, materially, etherically, astrally, even spiritually, shows that it has a perennial truth to it. It has an eternal truth to it, yeah. Now, the first process is the first distillation, where we extract the soul of the plant. And it's a very simple process. It's a steam distillation, similar to where you would release the essential oil. So the oil of the plant is called the soul. That's why, you know, and again, practically, who likes essential oils? Really? You like them? You sure? Ah, I like them. Why? Because they communicate with your soul, with your emotions, yeah, with your astral body. Yeah. And the sense of smell goes directly into the limbic system. The limbic system stores memories and emotions, and that's why you can walk past someone who's wearing an aftershave from the 90s, yeah, and you remember Top Gun, you know, you remember, yeah, or whatever you were watching at that time, or the girlfriend you had then, yeah, or the terrible board shorts you were wearing, you know. And then nothing gets discarded from this process. Nothing. There's zero waste. It's zero waste process. You get the hydrosol and the oil. And then you have plant matter left over, and you take that mush and you ferment it. Yeah. So that first process of distillation is dissolve. If we look at it from a Vedic perspective, it's Shiva. They call Shiva the destroyer, but Shiva is really the dissolver, dissoluter, you know, removing something from its physical trap. That's what we've done, that first process. And then we ferment that matter. And that's like that fermentation of, you know, has anyone fermented anything before? You have, yeah. It's scary. Fermenting things is scary. Firstly, because you're scared when you open that canister, you're like, what, you know, this is a science experiment, you know, what horrible science, like what foul smell is going to come out of this thing? And if you've done it and it's interesting, they've done this in experiments, you can do it yourself at home. you put 3 jars of rice and water in a cupboard. And on one jar, you come to it every day, you open the cupboard, you've got to keep it dark, yeah? Open the cupboard, one jar you say, I love you, one jar you say, I hate you, and the other jar you ignore. They do this experiment for students in Waldorf Steiner schools, show them the power of the mind. And what happens, and this is reproducible, is that when you open that jar of fermented rice you say, I love you to, it's fragrant, delicious. Smells like, you know, it's like what we call bram in Bali, rice wine. The one you say, I hate you to, is not very nice. Stinky, smells like my tennis shoes after a few months. Yeah. The worst one, though, is the one that is completely ignored. It's a very interesting analogy. Yeah. So anyway, thankfully in our lab, the fermentation, depending on the soul of the plant, the spirit of the plant, that gives you all sorts of different outcomes. But then you are saved by the next process, which is the second distillation, where we take the spirit from. So when you ferment something, obviously it forms a small level of alcohol. That's why it's called spirits, yeah. Whiskey, vodka, they're called spirits. It's from the alchemical terminology. And then we do a second fermentation and we extract from the plant the spirit of it. That's the pure spirit of the plant. Another way you can do that is you take that matter and you soak it in alcohol, in high proof alcohol. That's the cheating way. The real way is to really ferment that mass. And then after that, you get a very small amount. The hydrosol, you get a lot. And you get a small amount of the spirit, only a few mils. Yeah. From 2 liters, you'll get just maybe 50 mil, 30 mil if you're lucky. And then you take that matter once again, and then you burn it. That's called calcination. And that's not the last step yet. And that's where we extract the pure body, the physical body of the plant. And it's exactly the same process as cremating in Bali, where the body is burned. And I think in all cultures, yeah, we have the saying, not ashes to ashes, dust to dust. We have the saying, back to water. May you go back to water. Because you burn that material, that physical body. You burn it until it goes white or a grayish color. And you're left with all of the true material parts of that, which contain no carbon. So it's inorganic substance. And that matter is completely water soluble. Again, solve. And then we have the coagula. So we've dissolved in 3 stages. We've dissolved the astral body, the emotional body, the soul. We've dissolved the spirit from what's left over. And then we've further dissolved the physical body. And then the last part, which they call the conjunctio, and the coagula, the bringing together of everything, is you bring it all back together again. And that's when you get both the spagyric and the quintessence of that substance. So that soul you extracted, it's a bit like psychotherapy, no?
Yeah, well, I'm tracking it.
Yeah. The crisis, yeah, the healing crisis, whatever you want to call it. You bring the spirit back in, and then you bring the body, but the true body, the body that can be dissolved into everything again. On the periodic table of elements, it's a little bit like hydrogen, you know, that one on the periodic table, that atom that is in everything almost, yeah. The universal dissolution. Then you bring them all together and you bring them back into what's called the divine marriage. The divine marriage, the bringing back together of all those disparate parts that had to be extracted to understand them in each of their, in each of their individual states without being interfered with the ego, hiding us from our emotional baggages, damage, trauma, etc. And then from that, you get what's called the quintessence. That's the highest vibration of that alchemical extract. And that you could say is really the we would call it, the Vedic system describes it perfectly. It's the transformation of the aham, the small ego, into the atman. Yeah. So you have the atman now. And the atman is not the removal of the ego. It's not the destruction of the ego. It's the transformation and the evolution of that. Beautiful. From that ego which says, I want this, 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 and this now, to that ego which can understand, which can see the I in myself and the I in others, and understand it on a universal level. The Mahatma Gandhis of the world, the Martin Luther Kings, those who brought real transformation, not just for themselves, with all of their personal flaws, intact. And so that interesting word, quintessence. What does it mean? Quint, 5, essence, the fifth essence, the fifth element. So we've come out of these material concepts of, and again, we can go back to the alchemy, and the oil is the soul, and it's called the sulfur. The spirit is called mercury. It's not literal mercury, but it acts. Mercury is an anomaly. It's a metal that is liquid. At room temperature. And then you have the body, which is called the salt. Yeah. So sulfur, mercury, salt. That's the basic trinity of that alchemical process. And they're all dissolved, they're all solved, and then they're all brought back together again. And that is the reintegration of the whole person, of the whole plant, of the whole whatever institution. And that's why it's called healing, because the word healing, the root word of healing is wholeness. It's not wellness. It's not, and interesting, healing, health means wholeness. Health means a fully integrated system, which you mentioned Nietzsche before, which he would have called the Superman, or woman, Superman, Superwoman, where we've actually integrated all of those lost pieces of ourselves into something which is whole and which is real. And I think this is the time. Yeah, this is the time. This is why when we planned this, we didn't know that in 10 days' time, we have one of the most fundamental, rare moments of a planetary parade of 6 planets which will be visible to us at one time in an alignment in the sky. And then on March 20th, then we get another planet. We get Mercury in there, along with Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, Venus. The moon and the sun will obviously be in there. Rahu will be in there as well. So if there was a time to open that portal, now's the time. But the thing is with that on top of that, we have these solar flares of incredible intensity. Yeah. But that's the thing with all of these things, with all of these powerful cosmic events, you have a choice. Everything's choice. As the book that got me into astrology was called Choice-Centered Astrology, because I was like, I don't know about this fatalism, and it's true. You can do what you want with that. Now we're in an age where we have been, our hand is forced. First, our hand was forced by what we perceived as an outside authority. But like you said, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto. Yeah. Jupiter, Saturn, opposites but complementary. One is structure, one is expansion. One is contraction, one is expansion. One is structure, one is freedom. Yeah. One is, but they're they're two poles of this of the same energy. Then you have Pluto come in here, which is like you described it as the reckoning. It will, yeah. The ultimate trickster, the dark side, all of the things that you didn't see. And coming through this now at that, I look at this journey as demonstrated in most temples around the world, and definitely in Bali. I have Jabba Sisi, which is the outer wall of the temple, the outer gate, which they look like I call them stargates. Yeah, they're stargates, especially in when you're up on Pasar Agung, on Gunung Agung, on a new moon night. You see the Milky Way up there, the galactic center, right in between those gates. And then you come into the outer, what would you call that? Outer sanctum? Outer
courtyard?
It's like a courtyard. Yeah, that's the Jabatanga. You're not quite in there. You're already in consecrated ground. But you can still do a few things out in the consecrated ground that you can't do in the sanctum sanctorum. And then you come through into what's called the Jerwan. Jerwan is also another word. What do we use in Indonesian to describe? Yeah, gizzards, inner organs of the body, the liver, kidneys. For people who love sate kambing, yeah, tanpa jeroan or with jeroan, yeah, and that's where that's happening. So I kind of see this initiation stage as being in that courtyard area, and that's where we give the tantric sacrificial offerings to the icons that are brought into the temple. So they actually have to pass that threshold first. They have to receive offerings to the elemental beings first before they are allowed to enter into the temple. It's a purification ceremony. So the initiation in many ways is a purification as well. What do they call it? Baptism in fire.
Yeah, by fire.
Baptism by fire.
Yeah.
And we, definitely in the therapeutic process, we were talking about the healing crisis, something that I have to talk a lot about to people. For example, in homeopathy, we call it an aggravation. Some people call it a healing crisis. Some people call it a detox process. But often what happens in that stage, when you're working with the natural rhythms of the body, when you're not using anything suppressive, when you're activating that life force, the chi, the prana, the etheric body to rebalance itself, is you're going to get symptoms that you probably had suppressed a few years ago. They will come out. And that can be on a physical level, it can be on an emotional level, it can be through dreams, it can be even through interactions. You can even get friends from high school call you up again. It's incredible. I'm sure you see that as well in psychotherapy. Yeah. That I look at, in a practical way on the healing level as the initiation. And, you said in the departure, there's the refusal. Well, there's definitely a refusal in the initiation stage as well, I think. You make it into that, I think is it called the cortex, maybe? There's a name for it. I got to remember. I just know the Balinese name, Jabatanga. There's also the opportunity to go away, to leave that process. And that happens in many cases as well. And then, but if you go through that and you meet the guardians of the threshold, you mentioned that before as well. In Bali, you'll notice in front of those big gates, these two scary statues that look like demons or giants. They're holding weapons. They got big fangs. Yeah. A lot of people have a misconception that it's because we worship demons here, yeah? That's not true at all. They are literally representations of the guardians of the threshold. They're those aspects of yourself which terrify you the most. And sometimes they look like wild animals. Sometimes they look like I was saying before, demons with, terrifying heads and fangs and weapons, and that will just take you out. And the one who passes that threshold doesn't do it through physical strength, prowess, you can't beat them. They're impossible to beat. I mean, this dude's massive. He's got a big club and an axe, and there's nothing you can do against that. It's literally like the scene in while we're talking about movies, The Never-Ending Story. That's a good movie, by the way. I want to watch that again. Is that the one who gets past the Sphinx, which is another representation of the guardian of the threshold, is the one with the pure heart. Yeah. Like Parsival. Yeah. It's the Grail. Yeah. The Holy Grail. In that sanctum sanctorum lies the Holy Grail. It's not that this fighting strength, it's not this and that, although you need it to get there. It's, do you have the purity of heart, what we call in Indonesia, tulus ikhlas, yeah, to actually get through into that. Yeah. And that also includes an acceptance of those aggravations that will come up. An acceptance of, that skin eruption that you suppressed with cortisone when you were a child, or your parents did, did that for you. You want to face that again? If you are, then that's when you truly transform it. So I think the word transformation is important in that process as well when we think about the initiation. And often I'll come up, like I was saying, and you mentioned before, the types of illnesses we're seeing now are nothing. I got to a point where I was like, I didn't sign up for this. No. I didn't want to treat these cases. Yeah. I don't want to treat terminal illnesses.
For me, it's the personality disorders. Unbelievable narcissism is unpathological.
Yeah.
Pathological. It makes clinicians want to quit.
I mean, yeah, and then you add social media to that. It's like throwing kerosene onto that, right? And all of these avenues for that expression. It's just incredible now, isn't it? But what I often will pick people up on is this phrase that they will say, which is, I just want to be like I used to be. And that's the biggest trap. That's the biggest, I just want to be healthy like I used to be. I just want to be like I just want things to be like they used to be. That's that reckoning that you face then when you get to that threshold of initiation. And we live in an age now where with everything happening cosmologically, and then these incredible portals that are opening up. And I mean, even dry astronomers are like crazy about this, and there's excitement about what's going to happen. Nothing can stay the same. It has to transform. It may not be comfortable. It may not be pleasant. But it will be a releasing of many of those bonds that tie us to these systems, because it's everything, isn't it? It's the economy, the economic systems, political systems, education, medicine, farming. It's everything. It's everything. And we're now in this age where we don't have the luxury anymore. We used to have the luxury to kind of bypass it a bit. Yeah.
Kick the can down the road.
Yeah. I'll go and you know, whatever you want. Have another beer, watch another game of footy, whatever it is you like. Yeah. Now we're coming into this age of authenticity to the true self. Yeah. And I think in any of the spiritual traditions, if you want to whittle it down, it's getting to it's like the quintessence in alchemy. It's getting to the essence of the true self. Yeah. And with all the complexities of the gods and, you know, how many, I think in Hinduism we have 3 million. Yeah. Just a nice little number there. You know, all of the tradition, they've got this whole complex cosmology. At the end of the day, the simplicity of it is just to come back to the true self, which physically in Bali, we've mapped it out. It lies somewhere in the middle of the liver. Yeah. And all of these immense cosmologies, complexities, angels, demons, gods, goddesses, asuras, all of these are really, I see it as a cyclone around us, and we are the center of that cyclone. But very few of us remember that when we're in it, especially if we're watching the news a lot. So the initiation is that second, you know, after the battles that happen, you know, and the ordeals of the departure, you know, getting to the initiation, the biggest one. I think there's that scene in Harry Potter where they look into that mirror, and whatever terrifies you the most comes out of that mirror. And the only way you can defeat it is by laughing at it. One of my mentors said, you know, all diseases are demons, and the only way to transform them is by loving them, actually. Yeah. And yeah, we're not given that luxury anymore. Now's the time. So what are we going to do with it? What are we going to do with this initiation? How are we going to carry this forth? And really, it can seem so, you know, you can get into the science and the astrology and the esoteric sciences of all of this, and it looks very complex. But it's really, will you live the change that you want to see in the world? I mean, that's a Gandhi quote. Will you be that? How will you be that? What is your true responsibility to yourself, to the callings of your true self? Yeah. And finding, I think, you know, what do the samurai say? You know, finding that when you're in the fight, you've got to get into the state of no mind. It's no mind. That's what we call, in Bali, we call it, you know, sunyata, which is a state of complete emptiness. And again, you know, I asked one of my mentors, like, he calls it the Christ point, you know. I said, what's there? He says, nothing. It's absolutely nothing. It's complete emptiness and silence. It's exactly the same concept. Yeah. So did you bring the sword of initiation? I now pronounce you Sir Sir Zaki. Yeah. I love that scene actually out of did you ever see Kingdom of Heaven?
No.
It's a good movie. It's, you know, based on it's based on the Crusades, and where God, no, I can't remember his name. I think it's Sir Baldwin. You know, he's dying and he's just got one bastard son left. And that's all he's got. And he's like, all right, come here, Neale. He says, what did he say again? Protect the weak, uphold the faith, always tell the truth, even if it costs you your life. and here's a slap, so you remember it.
Mm.
You are now a knight. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, and yeah.
Thank you for that ride. I mean, I asked you about solva coagula. You painted the metaphors of the physical alchemy,
Mm,
and then you layered so beautifully the temple iconography, the courtyard and the inner sanctum where the initiation happens. So there's like, and what I was saying in lead up to the solva coagulas and the departure phase, there's something inside of us that is saying, I want the freedom.
mm,
But then there's a rational part of us that wants to hold on to the security.
mm.
So there's already a faint signal from the soul, and that gets us past the crossing over, where you leave the spouse because it's not working, you leave the job because it's not working. In the cultural level, it was the pandemic where we all went into lockdown. The status quo is forever disrupted. And I remember when lockdown happened, within a week of it happening, even though it was bewildering, there's something inside of me that said, we are never going back.
Yeah.
We're never going back. I knew that like almost within a week. I kept saying that because I was online. We went online. All the courses were online. I kept saying, don't hold your breath. There's no going back. Actually, we don't want to go back.
Mm-mm.
We didn't like it anyway. It wasn't working anyway. It wasn't working for so many people anyway. It was making us sick. The industrial food production, the industrial medicine, the corporatocracy, the corrupt governments. It had rotten to its core, and we're all holding on because of the salt pillar phenomenon of I'd rather choose security and identity over opening to the unknown.
Mm.
And you're so those beautiful metaphors of like melting it down into its constituent parts. That's where we are right now in this discussion is the initiation phase. You've left. There is no going back. And there are several subphases in the initiation. Once you cross the threshold, one of them is that you meet the mentor. When I talked about that is like when I came to Bali, I was looking for someone like you. When you go off into the netherworld, when you go off into the unknown, a part of the social part of us wants to find a guide. Like when you took me up Ibah, even you still needed a guide, our little guide.
Yeah.
The person that knows that landscape, even though it's unfamiliar to us through and through.
Yeah.
The refuge is held by the wisdom keeper who understands, is not afraid. Is not afraid by the distractions of the meltdown, what's happening. They're the alchemists. They know that actually we welcome this. This is part of the process. You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to be afraid that it creates discord. I love the fact that you used agitation. If I think back to what's happening in the streets of the mega cities across Europe and across the United States, the civil unrest, the massive migration that's putting extra strain on all the social services until you can't stand up. You don't know where to go. It's sort of imploding. Everything is at its tail end. And the alchemist is saying, don't go back. Don't just tread water. Breathe. This is all for your benefit. This is all to reboot. This is all to find what you said, the word health comes from wholeness. The reason that we need wholeness is because it's all out of balance. All of this thing that we're looking at and that we're living through is symptomatic of our illness. That's why I was saying, if you just have a moment of consideration tomorrow morning, you're reading the newspaper or you're just thinking about life, you're sitting in Bali traffic. The rivers are chock full of pollution. There's another fire and there's not enough money to handle the infrastructure collapse. There's another crackdown of some sort by the World Health Organization or the CDC, and you start to train yourself to see them through the lens of symptomology, archetypal symptomology, from the widest angle view of transition, just as you described agitation in the terms of the health and healing process. This is the dawning or the first stage of the dissolution. And they train you in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. They train the dying person, and if not the dying person, the family that's surrounding the dying person, to whisper into the ear, there's nothing to be afraid of. Just let go. Why? Because they understand that what you're letting go into is the indestructible, ever lucid nature of your mind, which is another way of saying the soul. And I'd ask you again to distinguish between the soul and the spirit. I wasn't quite clear.
Yeah.
But there's something about having that perennial wisdom to guide us that's reminding us, even while it's very painful to be fragmented, to be involved in the agitation, to have our entire homes, swaths of society consumed by fire, metaphorically. While that is painful, if we can see it through initiatory eyes, there's something about that that allows us to go even deeper into it rather than to resist or buckle.
Yeah.
That in a way, every spiritual culture has been through it before. You don't die into an abyss or a vacuum. You don't fall into a precipice. Though something separates, it does come back together. It is renewed. And every myth talks about this renewal, whether it's the 3 days after Christ's crucifixion, in which he actually descends and then arises again. It's right there. Salve coagula is there too. Begins with the cross and the crucifixion. Then there is the reckoning in hell.
Yeah.
It's called the harrowing of Christ.
Yeah.
And what he sees in hell is he sees all the fragments. Adam and Eve are there. All his brothers and sisters. It's the parts in our psyche that have been jettisoned, and you said it even, I mean, I'm skipping around a lot, but there's so many things that you said. One of them was, when you look in the mirror, you find all the parts, and the only way to meet the ugliness is to love your parts. Did you say something about that?
Yeah, to love the demons.
To love the demons. Yeah. It's like there's an exorcism going on, and then you use purification too. These are just multiple ways of understanding our symptoms, culturally and personally. That what we're reckoning with in the ordeal is the parts of ourselves that we have excised, is the parts of ourselves that we have forgotten or abandoned. One of the things that happened in the Age of Reason is the absolute necessary suspiciousness towards religion, but in throwing out that baby, we threw out soul.
Yeah.
And so we don't have any real trust in ourselves. And we only believe in what we can see. And what we can see now is breaking down. So that's why we're so afraid we have no other reference point for what this process is. And you and I last night, we were talking about how young boys, young women too, in postmodern societies have no rite of passage anymore. Yeah. And why is a rite of passage so necessary? Because it actually embodies this entire sequence, whether it's the alchemy of breaking down into constituent parts, crossing a threshold, meeting the demon, meeting the hardship, meeting the absolute excruciating pain, meeting the near-death revelation that you have to abandon this facade of an identity. You have to confront your biggest fear. They're ubiquitous in mythology, in astrology, in alchemy, in esoteric wisdom traditions. This is a must, and yet we are probably the first society or civilization that no longer has that reference. And so we're ill-equipped right now, save for little pockets of communities where there's a wisdom keeper holding that sacred knowledge and reminding us, this is how you do it. This is how you do it. So one of the 2-3 things about this phase of initiation is that there is a sub-stage. Once you meet a mentor, there's a sub-stage of getting what's called approaching the innermost cave. It's beautiful. Approaching the innermost cave.
Mm.
And then there's the stage of the ordeal. And just as you put it on the alchemical thread, I could now just do it in psychology terms. You know, the client that comes in rarely follows the thread of their symptom and usually doesn't really know where the therapy is going to go. They have very little clue what journey through the labyrinth and what minotaur awaits for them. They think that there's like, I'm having difficulty in my relationships. Something like that brings them in. I'm a little depressed.
Yeah.
I'm a little anxious.
Yeah. Can't sleep.
And here again, postmodern scientific paradigm of reductionism leads you to convince yourself that your brain chemistry, and if you just alter the brain chemistry, it will all go, your whole world will be ameliorated, and basically will get you back on the industrial treadmill so that you can have a relationship and you can go to work. And this is a byproduct of our overly scientific, soulless society. What's possible instead as an alternative is that your symptoms, your depression, the fact that you can't maintain a relationship, the fact that you are stricken with anxiety. In my case, I've had a history of panic attacks. What if they were, instead of symptoms to be ameliorated with a quick fix of Xanax? Although I love a good Xanax for a flight or something. But what if they were actually something to listen to that's guiding you deeper and deeper into a place in your being that you're unfamiliar with? And so this is the equivalent of this is the psychological equivalent of the dissolve phase that you described through physical alchemy. Session after session, you turn yourself over, you follow dreams, you follow intuitions, you follow symptoms. What Freud so beautifully called the regression in the service of the ego. What did he mean by that? Adult personality formation is construed by so many defense mechanisms that keeps our best foot forward and keeps us looking attractive and keeps us in some semblance of some pseudo relationship. And we hide innocently behind those masks. But just like the societal institutions that are beginning to break down, what a symptom of anxiety or panic may be is the turning point where the levees that we have constructed are susceptible to Katrina. They're going to break down, and you don't want to buttress yourself against it. And this is the central message that I'm trying to live by and trying to live and communicate, is not to resist anymore. Read the signs, whether you're working individually on your life and you see the depression, you see the anxiety, you see the fear, whether you're looking at it culturally and you see the infrastructure breaking down in all the domains of lived existence and lived experience. Try not to fear. Try to go deeper. Try not to resist. Try not to hold on and keep the infrastructures going. If you look carefully, this is necessary now. And you keep saying there's actually no more turning back now. There's no more avoiding it.
Yeah.
So go deeper into it. And there is a moment there where it starts to teach you something. The regression in the service of the ego is when you relinquish some of your defense mechanisms that keep you intact. Maybe memories start to unsurface. Maybe trauma starts to resurface itself. Maybe there's something in the soma, which isn't really, it doesn't emerge, at least from trauma research. We may not have a photograph, a coherent photograph, like a Polaroid picture of the trauma that we experienced. It may just be a somatic rush.
And sensation.
This stuff must have an equivalent for you in what you're dealing with people when they come through symptoms. It's like it may be 20 years ago of stored energy that has just breached the dam, and they don't know how to contain it. They don't know where it belongs.
Yeah, it's funny you use that analogy because when you were talking before, I had just had this vision of a person trying to hold a dam that's about to collapse and thinking they're gonna stop it. A really big dam. It's just the vision, the exact vision I got was that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the reckoning, this is the purification, all the words that were the initiation is a purification, it is a reckoning. It's finally getting honest or creating a space. So this is why it was beautiful that you went from the progression of the alchemy, something in your mind associated the temple
Mm.
and the three domains of the temple as you go from the outer courtyard guarded by the temple guardians into the courtyard and into the inner sanctum. This is called approaching the innermost cave. In psychology, this is when your alliance with the therapist, the rapport creates the sense of safety so that you can let go and you can regress. You can go in what I call the time machine back in time.
Yep.
And maybe it's not clear because if you were under any duress, your brain wasn't able to consolidate pictorial memory. So all you're left with is rushes of somatic experience, terror, disembowelment, paralysis, anxiety. And normally what a ordinary trained civilian, a person in public life with no initiation, no framework, they'll place that outpouring in real time. They'll say it's my relationship. They'll say it's the taxi. They'll say it's the tax man. They'll say it's the government. They're locating that rush in the matrix of daily life, where actually what it is something historic that is beckoning or calling for integration. It's calling to be reassembled as part of the mandala. It's calling our attention so that it can be replaced in that temple of love or awareness or acceptance. So this is what we're talking about right now, is using a framework to meet our inner experience and using a cultural matrix to meet our cultural experience so that we don't add any more fire or fuel to the fire. We're not aggravating it further. We're seeing it for what it is. We're also seeing it in the way that Pam Gregory sees things as this is opportunity. This is crisis is opportunity. It's you want to heal once and for all. This is the time. This is the time. You want to hobble in a constricted way with your relationships, guarded and mistrusting and causing strife and causing discord and always reacting and always being triggered. One of the ways that our current society, at least in woke America, deals with triggers is to salinate the environment and to provide warnings for everybody so that they're forever safe in the environment. Don't read this book. Don't talk to these people. You have to be pampered and protected. And I say, okay, it probably comes from a really charitable intention. Sure. The problem with it is you can't forever salinate the environment, because what you do eventually is you will burn the Library of Alexander. There'll be no more books, and there'll be no more places and no more institutions except to a sum of one yourself. And even there, you'll be terrified. What's better is clean the wound at its deepest place. And in a way, that's sort of like if we just shift now to Bali, and we talk about pollution, traffic, corruption, discord, the influx of capitalistic agendas, greed, all the inputs that have in a way started to contaminate a refuge island. Here again, what can we do?
Mm.
You could get terrified, you could close your eyes, you can go into denial, you can pretend, you can take a buck and just go with the greed agenda or the greed side, right?
Yep.
So this is, I want to place this because I want to put a pin in it just and turn it back over to you. We're in the initiation. Culturally, it's the confrontation with the underlying illnesses, and psychologically the same. And in comes the esoteric traditions that empowers us how to actually heal. And I think Bali's a great case scenario because what they say is just as I think it was Jung, just as the night is darkest, that's when the light is.
Yes.
Closer and closer and closer you get to this moment where you have to confront the demon and surrender to the demon in love, or to accept the demon, to recognize its luminosity, to recognize it's your own soul, to heed its advice, to hear its warning, to reintegrate. Then some new possibility opens, some new vista opens.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one. I keep thinking about the first question you had, which was what's the difference between the soul and the spirit? You know, no, because it's a very important one, because it's historically significant to people of the, who grew up under the Christian traditions, because I forgot which meeting at the Vatican it was, but there was a meeting where there was a passage in the Bible that said soul, spirit, and body.
Mm.
And they removed spirit and they just left it with body and soul.
Mm.
That man is body and soul. So that act has led to a great kind of, let's say, a loss of the concept of what spirit is in more of the Western European traditions. However, that concept was never removed from the esoteric mystical traditions of the West. And I think, a lot of, let's say, Western esoteric people came back to the East to find the answer to that, which is answered in the Vedas. And there is a distinction. There is jiva, or jiva, which is soul. And the jiva is that which reincarnates. It's that which carries our desires, dislikes, likes, karma.
Karma, yeah.
Yeah. But the spirit is more subtle than that. If you want to look at it more on a spiritual science scale, it's actually degrees of subtlety. The spirit is that part of yourself which you may call the true self. It's that part of you which is at complete oneness with the divine. It's that divine spark within everybody called the Atman. Yeah. But even the Atman has different levels. Sangyang Atma, Sangyang Sunyatma, Sangyang Parama Sunyatma, So you then even have an evolution in the spirit. You have spirit, but then you have the silent spirit. And then you have that which is beyond the silent spirit. And then you come back to Sangkan Paraning Dumadi, or as they called it in the, I'm very interested in the pre-Hindu traditions actually of Indonesia, which there's a spiritual path called Kapitayan, which very similar. They say maybe it's the first monotheistic religion where God is considered so beyond your perception. It's beyond your perception. You know? And they just call God by the name Sangyang Tunggal, which is the one. Tunggal, single, one. And so there's actually a nice verse. It was actually one of Rudolf Steiner's favorite verses from the Bhagavad Gita, which talks about that. And it says, the English translation is more radiant than the sun, purer than the snow, finer than the ether, is the self, the spirit in my heart of hearts. I am this self am I. So the spirit is the self with a capital S, the true self. Yeah. And you could say in all of that, that's what we're trying to find, There's again, and that's where, I like to bring things back to practical applications. And essentially, when you're more connected with your true self, that's when your intuition, it's relative to how connected you become with your intuition. And Rudolf Steiner wrote a book. He wrote many books, but there's one book. A journalist came up to him and said, "What will remain of Rudolf Steiner in 1,000 years?" And he said, "Only one thing, the philosophy of freedom. Nothing else will exist." And that's one book that he wrote actually early in his sort of journey. And essentially, I mean, it's not such a big book, but it's quite complex to read. But what he's essentially saying is freedom is relative to the degree in which you live your life through your intuition, in which your life is guided by your intuition. And your intuition is almost never logical, and it's almost never going to be something that keeps you in that samsara. That's that's moksha. That's liberation. That's the transcendence of those cycles of safety, but again, looking at the middle path, it's not reckless either. It's life affirming. Yeah. And so really, I think, and it's scary. It's the abyss. It's like one of the scariest things you can do is look out at the abyss. Have you ever been diving?
Have I been what?
Scuba diving.
Scuba diving. I haven't, no.
And you look out I'm not a scuba diver. I just borrowed, my brother had some gas left in his tank. So I'm like, yeah, it's Bali, Yeah, I'll have a go. And then I'm going around the shivering and I look out and I didn't know there's an abyss there. I looked at it, was the scariest thing I ever saw. Because I looked at the abyss and what did I see? First thing I saw was Jaws coming at me. Second thing I saw was the Kraken, giant squid, some weird fish from the deep, like nothing. I mean, none of it came out. It was completely empty, but that's what my mind, saw in that state. And so, yeah, talking about Bali as you did before, and I think all of those pockets of the mystery schools around the world. I would think of maybe like Bhutan as well as one of them. The places that have these intact ancient mystery schools. I think that actually they will be the most challenged in this time because they have to be tested. The people, what gives spirit to a place is not necessarily the place. Yeah. It's the people and the consciousness in that place. Yeah. And we're seeing that now here. We're seeing pockets of Bali which are being transformed now, that they're not operating within the cosmology anymore. And then we're seeing others which are holding it very strongly. But I think what we're going to maybe see in this age is that, we're also seeing a lot of people attracted from all over the world who are also wisdom keepers, yeah, esoteric students, those aligned with the mystery schools, whether they know it or not, are also being called in. And I see more of a, Bali's, maybe as a foreigner, you come to Bali and you feel like Bali is so Balinese, yeah? Balinese society. It's almost impenetrable to understand, yeah? You think, but it's a complete melting pot of traditions from all over the world. But they're preserved here in this. And so I think in order for us to make the transition, because the transition is going to happen anyway. It's what comes up, the more we talk about this, the less attached I get to the problems, to be honest, because I see that it's superfluous. I mean, if the being of Bali wants to clean this place, he or she or it will clean it. I mean, we can pick some rubbish up and things, but those who need to be cleaned will be cleaned. I mean, however, it's interesting when we look at the last eruption of Gunung Agung, which was in 2017, 2018. I remember because my youngest was born when it was erupting. So that's why I called him Tjok Agung, Ian, in memory of Gunung Agung. The community came together and prayed, and the mountain subsided. Yeah. But we can learn so much. Actually, I learned so much from telling stories to my children. And I tell one of their favorite stories is the story of Basaki. It's a story of Siddhi Mantra and Manik Angkaran. So there was a holy man named Siddhi Mantra. It's actually the story of how Bali and Java were separated because they were once obviously attached. And it's, you go to Gilimanuk, to the western port, and you can see Java there. You can swim to it if you want. It's very close. It's not very deep. Yeah. It's quite a recent separation in terms of like geological time. Yeah. Actually, Sumatra, Java, Bali, they were all one. They probably also connected all the way up to, what would it be, like the Malaysia, yeah? Malaysian border. But, Siddhi Mantra was a holy man. He had a son named Manik Angkaran, who was not a very holy man. He was a gambler. He loved to gamble. So, Siddhi Mantra had siddhis. That's why he was called that. He could perform miracles. Yeah. So his son would come and say, I need more money, father. Give me more money. Yeah, sure. Then eventually his father he's like, I don't know if this is a good thing. So, and he has nothing left in the end. He says, sorry, son, I have nothing left. And he's like, come on, these debt collectors are going to kill me. You got to help me out. And he's like, okay. So he makes a pilgrimage to Basuki. So Gunung Agung, where the great dragon god Basuki lives. That's why it's called Basaki. And he has Siddhi mantras. Let's say his power is his bell and his mantra, like the priests have. When the priests ring their bell, they're calling also the dragons. That's their way of communicating with the various deities of the spiritual realm. And he calls Basuki, Basaki, and the great dragon emerges and says, what do you need? I hear you're a famous man. How can I help you? I want to help you. He says, yes, my son has gambling debts. I need some money, please. So the great dragon shakes his scales and gold, jewels, everything falls out. I'll just one condition, Siddhi Mantra, tell him to stop gambling, just stop this. Yes. Lord, I shall. So he goes back, he's got the money, says, son, here's the money, pay your debts off, and no more gambling. So, of course, Father, thank you, thank you, thank you. But what does a good gambler do? They go back. So gambles again. Obviously, when a gambler gets money, they lose more money usually, actually. So he comes back, he says, look, can you go back to the dragon and ask for some more money, please? And Siddhi Mantra says, no, I made a vow. I said, I'll give you no more. You got that's your last chance. That's it. And so he's in a bit of a state. He goes asking around. He says, well, when my father went to Gunung Agung, what did he take? And they say, oh, I think he took his bell with him. Oh, okay. So he goes back waits for his father to go to sleep. He steals the bell and he goes himself to Gunung Agung. Oh, he's just like, oh, dragon comes out. Okay. Manik Ankran, why are you here? Have you been gambling again? He said, yes, I need some more money. It's like, okay, I told you not to do it, but the dragon is very forgiving, very generous. That's like Bali, yeah? Very generous, and yeah, okay, you messed up a bit, but I'll give you a bit more. So he gives him one condition: don't ever come back and ask me for anything else. Okay. And then the dragon turns around to go back inside the mountain. And Manik Ankaran sees the dragon's tail. And it's the most gold and jewels he's ever seen in his life. And he has a kris with him. And out of his greed, he cuts the tail of the dragon. The dragon's very forgiving, very generous, but you don't cut a dragon's tail off. So what does he do? He chases Manik Ankaran and vaporizes him with his fire. And Siddhi Mantra comes back and he's like, where's my son? We saw him go after Gunung Agung. Oh my God, what's happened? It must be bad. So he goes and Basuki says, yeah, I burned him because he cut my tail off. I'm so sorry. He's like, okay, Siddhi Mantra, you're such a good man. I'll give you one more wish. He says, all I wish is that my son comes back to life. Bring him back to life. Basuki thinks about it. He says, yeah, I can do this. I'll do it for you. You asked for that. I said I would grant your wish, so I have to give it to you. But one condition, that you will never see him again. I'll bring your son back to life, but you shall be separated forever. Said, of course, I accept that. I'll do anything for my son to come back to life. And he appears, he comes back to life. And at that time, the islands of Bali separated from Java, and they never saw each other again. So in a way, the question, with everything that's going on here, we often think of it in purely human terms, but we have to remember, we are at least on one part of the earth where we can talk rationally about the spiritual realm. And that, I think, if you were to sum it down into one thing, we have been in this age, whether you want to call it the Dark Age or Kali Yuga or whatever, what it means is it's not necessarily bad. What it means is we've been pulled down very heavily into the material realm. And we see that in materialistic reductionism in science and all sorts of things, economy, everything. Where in the corporate world, it's about how much money you make. It's not about the destruction that you've caused doing that. There's no accountability on that level. It's lost its dharma, the morals and ethics. But now we're on the uprise again, and what that means is a reconnection, establishment of our connection to the spiritual world and to that which is unseen. And particularly a subject which is the etheric, which is something that's not talked about by many people. But this is actually where, again, we're going to see things like the advancement in technology. The technology we have now is I think, Rudolf Steiner called it atomic technology. It runs on electricity, which is made by a coal-powered or nuclear-powered or whatever power plant. Even the green energy solutions, they're still powered by the same stuff. I mean, it was diesel powering those trucks.
Your electric car still needs to be powered by
electricity. It's still powered by coal in Indonesia. Even the solar panels were made by coal. Yeah. And they don't last forever. They will go. So what lies in the future is something so beyond our perception. It doesn't even, this doesn't even exist. Yeah. It's something called a resonance technology, and it's the harnessing of the etheric. And what we're seeing now, I can tell you from a clinical standpoint, physically, is that we are not metabolizing vitamin D the way we used to. We need to connect with these energies of the sun, of the moon, of the elements, of the planets. Beautiful sunset out there right now. We need to look at those sunsets. We need to look at the sunrise. We need to absorb. The medicine is so simple, actually. Yeah. And we're seeing now that we'd be called to, and both also from a consciousness level, from that conscious integration, we're going to be learning that two people can stand in the sun, one just stand there, and the other one consciously absorb the rays of the sun and send them to a part of their body to heal, and they will have different effects. You can't quantify these things with numbers anymore. Yeah. It's and this perhaps will be the emergence of the true human potential. And again, in the Hindu scriptures and texts, there's many tales of that even the gods are afraid of us when the true human has his true potential. Even Indra can be knocked off his throne in heaven by the curse of a sage. And the sage represents the true human, actually. Yeah. So with everything that's going on around us, I mean, I would say if you want them to stop spraying chemicals on farms, plant your own garden first. If you want, if you're disturbed by the traffic, walk or ride a bicycle. I mean, it's all comes back to us, actually. Yeah. Yeah. Now this is the time where we are accountable. Yeah. More accountable than we used to be. Yeah. And yeah. I'm going through the lontars in our house temple at the moment. And there's some incredible technologies in those lontars, incredible things people used to do. And I think, in terms of Bali, even though it is one of these incredible last bastions, as you describe it in a way, we need to also come back to our mystery school and really absorb it. And perhaps now it's time to share it with the world. I think I watched an interview with the Dalai Lama, and he said he was thankful for China invading, because if they hadn't invaded, then they wouldn't have been able to share this with everyone.
Yeah, that sentiment is the heart of that's the tail end of the ordeal, and that's how you meet the treasure, right? What you're talking about. That is the alchemy point.
Yeah.
I knew this magician, not the magician that pulls a rabbit out of a hat, but Western magic, Damien Eccles.
Yeah.
Damien Eccles spent 20 some years in solitary confinement for a crime he didn't commit. When he was young, he was arrested and charged with murder with two other friends. I think they were called the Memphis Three.
Right.
He was put in solitary confinement for most of that time and describes his ordeal in his first book, and then writes how ceremonial magic, basically Tantra, Western Tantra, saved him because he was using the confinement as a portal for his internal work and working with, even though he was beaten every night and alone for hours on end, it became a crucible for his own inner alchemy. And, eventually Johnny Depp and a number of other celebrities helped get his case reevaluated and he was released. There wasn't evidence. He was kind of framed. And I met him at the Met and he took me through a tour of all the Assyrian temple art.
Wow.
And one of the things that struck me about Damien was that he talked about his ordeal, and at the end of it, he said, "I'd have it no other way." And that's what you just said. That marks the point where the ordeal has been alchemized fully, and the recognition that the thing that almost destroyed us actually liberated us because of that ultimate confrontation with the deepest part of our being, the labyrinth minotaur. Something was transformed. And trauma work is like that too. I mean, I'll never forget that statement. I'll have it no other way. It means that on the other side of the ordeal, once you discovered something about yourself that you could never discover had you not gone that way, you would never change it. And it made me think of something my teacher Bob Thurman told me too. And I never heard this anywhere else. I couldn't find the source for it, but it's in Buddhism. It's like, after eons and eons of struggling in samsara, when you're finally enlightened as a Buddha, you retroactively remember that you were always free. Isn't that amazing? Think about that for a second. Countless lives since beginningless time, you have been circling in samsara, lost and tormented. So you have a database or a residual memory set of all your misery lives, all your miserable lives. But upon awakening, retroactively, they are all found to be false presuppositions, and the realization that you were always free is what dawns. And it's the same way of saying. Good trauma therapy in which some part of your being that was traumatized, abused, abandoned, wholly dissociated, when you're able to finally face it and reclaim it and do it in the crucible of care, you become more than the sum of your parts on the other side of it. You gain some conviction, like confidence or compassion. You never see the world the same way ever again. You are more endowed as a result of your pilgrimage. And so that, just to go back to that one statement where we were saying our civilizations, our Western civilizations, our industrial civilizations, probably more appropriately now have lost our initiations, right? Because we're exporting
it's
industrial,
West,
the industrial pathology
model,
everywhere. If we can revive the wisdom schools, if that even means having to go to the East and to bring back or revive the ones from the West or whatever way. I mean, now people have a massive fascination with Egypt, for example. Well, they may have to go to a Tibetan or a Balinese to understand magic so that they can revive what has been lost in some way. Or maybe there's still wisdom keepers that they can find. Who knows? But the point is that the rite of passage The wisdom contained in the rite of passage will be revived. Pilgrimage will be revived. I have a friend or colleague who's publishing under the same publishing house as my next book, and she's reviving the Asclepion in Greece. I thought, fantastic. The Asclepion were holistic before we even had the word or needed to have the word holistic.
Yep.
They were based on thermal energy, thermal baths. They contained sound meditations.
Yep.
They contained probably psychedelic substances for induced dream.
Yep.
In those dreams, vivid meetings of the celestial beings occurred in which you can look at it through a deity lens, or you can look at it archetypally. Some inner wisdom was contacted that actually transmitted the healing remedy that is needed. They had gymnasiums for physical health. They had surgeries. They had drama. Drama was therapeutic.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Because catharsis happened by over-identifying with the protagonist.
Yeah.
You see a protagonist go through the hero's rite of passage, and you identify with them. So their heartbreak, this story of the separation between Bali and Java, like the identifying with the love of the father, identifying with the part of you that, greed will be your demise, coming up against the worst case fears, finding your way through to the Damien Eccles moment.
Yeah.
All transmitted through a theater with 15,000 people there having an actual catharsis. All of this is on a campus, and she's basically going back so that she can go forward.
Yeah.
And so I think when I look at here in Bali, and I met the gentleman that runs the Ashtunkara Way. Have you met him before?
Of course.
What's his
Tim
name?
Fidgel.
What's his name?
Tim.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tim. So sweet.
Tim Fidgel. Yeah.
If you ever wanted to meet someone with a heart of gold, living his dharma.
Yeah.
I mean, what he's done to revive the pilgrimage trek through Bali, to empower local communities to revive old systems of regenerative farming so that everything can come together again as a representation of the future, what could happen. And when you and I were talking about it, one thing I'd like to say is just when the night is darkest, there are the rays of light, which is to say, just as the banking system is collapsing, Bitcoin is coming out. Just as corrupt governments collapse, people are understanding how to self-empower themselves through people's movements and reclaim some of that power so that the ordinary person can self-govern. There are indications about farming and energy and medicine, all of which I admire. You do all of those things. And what you do is you help each of us see what it might be like in the future at a scalable, as an alternative. And all of it is underpinned by Dharma. That is always the main foundation, is having decency. And the last thing I want to say before we grab a few questions is the idea that your greatest strength is your vulnerability. That's one thing that Damien Eccles really emphasizes. This idea that we have to wear a mask, this idea that we have to put our best foot forward, the idea that we have to fabricate tenderness, vulnerability, wounding is how we actually unify. And it's the one thing that the current culture wants to mask and ameliorate. It happens to be the one commonality that our humanity can relate over. So there's something about the future about being authentic. And I think you mentioned authenticity.
Yeah.
So I'll let you have the last little word, and then because maybe you guys have something and something online, anybody online too.
Yeah, I think we got the sign, we got the 7 o'clock sign from my boss behind the computer. So I think it's a good opportunity. We should open up the floor to questions. Anybody online, send through if you have anything, comments, experiences, questions on how to navigate this The threshold. Yes, Louis, I'm going to come close to you so everyone can hear. Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting because me and my friend were just discussing, this driving, like, and thank you, first of all, for merging all these kind of topics because it's the hot topic right now. We were just driving and also discussing all this through our own perspectives of our own journeys and how to navigate this with the level of sensitivity that basically is just intensifying in every each moment, and you understand that there is like some points of not coming back. They already passed, but now what to do? How to deal with this like intensity? Because the light stream is just backing and backing and backing. So how to ground, how to ease in this intensity is
Yeah. Right. Good question.
Yeah.
I used to have a boss. He was a very cynical guy. And when I'd ask him a question and he didn't know the answer, he goes, "Good question. Glad you asked."
And that's it.
That's it. Well, would you like to? Me? Okay.
Physical remedies maybe you have?
Yeah. Okay. No, it's a good point. I think did everyone online hear that okay? Did you get the audio okay? Yeah. How do we what tools, yeah, what practices, what practical steps can we take to integrate this? I mean, there's so many words for it. People are calling it the ascension. People are calling it the upgrade, this and that. There's many words. First principle I would actually talk about is the law of subtlety. So that which is more subtle will always influence that which is more, in Old English, you would say gross. That which is more, you could say manifest, material. Yeah. That which is more subtle will always influence that which is heavier. Yeah. Our physical body moves because our mind directs it to do so. The mind is more subtle than the physical body. Simple thing. It's almost like the law of density. That which is more subtle, that's what I want. Always influences that which is more dense. Yeah. So if there really is an upgrade, if we are getting these incredible influxes of different galactic photons, gamma rays, things that we didn't get before. I mean, the radiation field of the Earth has, for some reason, actually decreased a little bit, apparently. And we're getting an influx of these galactic different rays, not just the rays of the sun. We're getting Jupiter, Mars, all of these other things are coming in different frequencies. And I think it's going to be interesting on that day, January 25th and then March 20th, when all of those planets align, all of those archetypes are going to be aligned. They're either going to tear, they're going to cause incredible, energy. Like we come back to the concept, energy isn't good or bad. Energy doesn't care if it's good or bad. It's energy. It's just how we direct it. So I think firstly, one of the things that I'm personally doing practically is connecting as much as I can with the sun. Yeah. Connecting as much as I can with the element of water in its purest form that I have access to, which is getting more and more challenging these days. But also remembering that I have the influence, I have the ability to shift the vibration in that substance, even if it's water out of a tap in a city. Yeah. We're becoming more and more accountable for our own influence on that food, our own ability to actually transform the elements. There's more and more evidence coming out that we can actually transform, we can even transform the mineral structure of certain plants just by certain intentions, which is actually against the laws of chemistry. Yeah. The mineral is indestructible and is irreplicable. Yeah. You can't destroy it, you can't change it. If there's 20 milligrams of magnesium in this plant, you can't add it and you can't subtract it. But they've actually shown experiments where you can change that. Yeah. So I think firstly coming back to remembering that we have a subtle body, that we have at least, you know, if you don't want to get into soul and spirit, that's fine. But at least remembering you have an etheric body and every culture has a word for it. And shifting our focus to the maintenance of that. And I think we're coming out of the age of just doing sport for sport. We do things really with the intention of increasing health. I think even Socrates said it was an insult to the body to do sport just for sport's sake. There should be a reason that you're riding your bicycle, so, or whatever you do. I think more pilgrimage. I think more work in groups is important. You know, Steiner called it the age of Archangel Michael. And I think you could translate that figure into any spiritual context. It's not a Christian term, it's not a Judaic term, it's beyond all of that, yeah. And really, you know, I'm realizing that personally in myself, that I need others' souls and spirits to do the work. And it feels good and it works better when this happens. And that we're in this age now of sharing, you know. Patents don't really matter anymore. They're getting more and more obsolete. Even, you know, even intellectual property, yeah, with access to things and shifting our way of looking at how we hold things for ourselves. And for me, it's a lesson personally. Remembering to pray, because we can get caught up in mindfulness and we can get caught up in the esoteric mechanisms and the magic and things. But, you know, prayer, contemplation, meditation, they're three of the most important things. And recently I went to a holy man, the father-in-law of a high priest, and I was on a mission, and you know, he's living very simply, very, very humble. There's very peaceful energy there in his home, and I was asking questions, and he said, "Come on, you drove." So it was out in Karangasem, up Gunung Agung a little bit, not too high though. And I said, "I want to know how I can meet my true self." And he said, "Oh, that's easy." So, and this is a meditation, take some notes on this. This is a meditation he gave me, and I tried it out. And I just had a little revelation the other day about somebody who had the experience, actually. He's another one of my teachers of Balinese text, Aksara. Yeah. He said, "Sit down." So there's not going to be a fancy meditation technique. It's a very simple one. In as comfortable as you possibly can, any time of the day you like. Doesn't have to be before sunrise, doesn't have to be 5 a.m., 4 a.m., whatever, anytime. I said, "What time's the best time to meditate?" He said, "You'll know yourself." For me personally, for him personally, it was 9 a.m., which is unusual. Yeah. Close your eyes. Make your breath calm. Make your breathing calm. Make your mind calm. And make your body be calm. And then he's thought about it and he said, no. I'm going to change it. Don't make anything. If you try to make your body calm, you'll do the opposite. Let your breath be calm. Let your mind be calm. Let your body be calm. And one day, your true self will appear in front of you, and he will look like you, but a little bit younger. So I'll take that as a compliment. And then you ask question. So, but there's one trick. Don't ever do it with the intention that you're trying to see your true self, because as soon as you do that, you won't see it. And so what you'll feel is you lose the complete sensation of your body. You won't feel your body. You won't remember your breathing. That's when it will happen. It hasn't happened to me yet. But what I can say is I did that technique and I had so much energy. I was like, yeah, it was interesting. And I was because I've gone into a lot of these different complicated techniques, yeah. And it was nice to hear something so simple, yeah. And he was of the Buddha lineage in Bali, Padanda Buddha, yeah. And he said that's where you go inside that cave, yeah. I would say pay attention to your dreams, write them down. And, you know, I had a patient, she was dying here, and very, very sick patient once upon a time. And I said once, you know, like, what is the dream that you have for your life that you would never do it? You think it's completely impossible to achieve. Yeah. And it was an interesting one to hear. An interesting lesson for myself as well, because I realized how much of my life wasn't aligned with that. And it was a perfectly actually feasibly good dream to have, but it's just impossible. Yeah. It hurt in the perception. I said, at least hold on to that if you have nothing else left for. And actually, after that, the condition improved. Very interesting. Yeah. And then many other magical things happen. Open yourself up to that. Some unexpected things will come into your life that will actually help that process. Yeah. And there was another particular, a Western mystical tradition I was involved with, Rosicrucians, and they tell you to find your spiritual home. And it has a particular, yeah, you'll find it yourself. And often that dream may be related to that. Yeah. Yeah. And look more, you know, realize that the things, even, you know, I work with homeopathy, which is very subtle, but I'm even finding now I need to look for even more subtle things. Yeah. Yeah. As tools to navigate it. And keep learning, go back and you know, it's interesting. It's like how much with the mystery traditions and things, it's like peeling an onion. Yeah. And that's what I'm finding with the mystery traditions here, even actually with all the complexity, the more I peel it back, the more simple it becomes. Yeah. 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 That would be my advice. Do that meditation and also do the review of the day. Go backwards in your mind before you go to sleep. Sit in an upright position. Go backwards in your mind. And again, I give this all the time, this exercise. I'm getting tired of it. But then I ask, did you do it for 30 days? And like, no. And it's like, you know, sometimes that's what prison cells are for, right? Like actually going back, you know, into these having the opportunity to do that. And this is an exercise of the I body, the self with the big S, is remembering your day in reverse order until the time you woke up, and then go straight to sleep. You know that. But do it every night for 30 days. And then you see things, because that's the other, the thing with I think, I forgot who said it. It was a good one. Is like, clairvoyance. I think they were talking about tuning the intuition and clairvoyance. Clairvoyance doesn't fall into your lap. You got to work for it. Mediumship, you can be born with. You can be born a trance medium. You don't even want to try it, but it's extremely taxing on the body. A lot of trance mediums who are born with that, they suffer physically. They have a very hard time. But clairvoyance and intuition is work. That's why it's called a mystery school. It's not called a mystery shop. You don't get to go in there and pay $1,000 and get it and have it downloaded the next day. Yeah. It is a process. Yeah. 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 I think that's all from me.
Right.
Yeah. Ada lagi online? Nggak ada ya? Anyone else? Yeah, Zach, I'm coming over. Yeah.
Well,
you got Steiner there.
yeah.
Nice.
I've been learning a lot about Rudolf Steiner because of you. And I found this quote.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
It's hard reading.
I mean, like he's a great Renaissance man. That not much of people know about. So the quote says, "The healthy social life is found when, in the mirror of each human soul, the whole community finds its reflection, and when in the community, the virtue of each one is living." So
living virtue.
Yes. So my question is, how do you guys respond to that? And well, I find it very amusing, this quote. We talk a lot about our authentic self, finding our inner sanctum, really. And but my question is more towards, how do we exert this external energy after this finding of our true self? What do you want to do about it? Like of finding of our role, and like how do we connect with each other and like play our role in a communal way. So that's my question.
Yeah, it's interesting. When we have meetings for the school that I'm a part of, we use that quote as an opening meditation.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's an important one. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I think about is from the astrology that we're heading into. The paradigm is of the Aquarian archetype. But astrologer Ray Grassi likes to point out that for every archetype and every season or every epoch is the counterbalance. So it's not just that we're heading into the age of Aquarius, we're heading into the age of Aquarius Leo.
Yeah.
So there's actually two energies to counterbalance each other, which is a way of saying there's two archetypes to think about to answer your question. So what is Aquarius? Aquarius is groups, communities. So one of the answers that I was, I'm sorry, your name? Ruby? Luby. She was saying, what do you do about the energy? And one of Tjok's many remedies is community, which is in my field in psychology is another way to say of co-regulation. If your nervous system is shutting down, the best remedy is to find another body, like just a nice face, because we have facial recognition and mirror neurons, a good energy read taps enough in our nervous system to remind ourselves not to be in an alarm, a limbic response. So the more that we can have communities built on good foundations, they serve as surrogate family systems. And we are coming out of an age where we've been hyper individualized. Everything is the Lone Ranger, John Wayne, do it, pull up yourself up by bootstraps and go win it yourself. Go slay the demon yourself. So one of the things to think about is good communities, good, strong foundations of ethics, places of co-regulation, places where kids are learn empathy right off the bat as quickly as possible, sensitivity to their environment. All the right brain comes online. We've been too strong left brain, all about logic, filling in little, information bubbles on tests. Part of my kids, the world opened up when they got here and they started returning to play and innocence and imagination. The archetype of the Aquarian unity is counterbalanced by the Leo, which is the individual. So this is the central archetype of the time. The next 2,160 years is going to be dominated by how do you balance individual rights and sovereignty with our collective need for, community. And the first 500 years of such a long span is the testing out period. So most of the things that we're seeing right now, like social justice, is heading in the right direction, but it's mostly shadow. What I mean by shadow is it's not worked out yet, and there's still a lot of addiction and trauma that's underpinning it. It's kind of ugly. So it's got the right orientation, but it hasn't been purified yet. It hasn't found its true expression yet. How do we take care of a larger group? Right now, what we do is we cancel people and we beat them over the head with sticks and we silence people and we ostracize people. It's coming out of a good place, but it's completely unethical and it doesn't work. So you imagine if you have such a long span of time that there's centuries of working out, how do we do clean energy? And I love what you said today about like becoming more receptive to the etheric body. We have tools and technologies that are so far beyond our imagination that are going to come up in this span of time, maybe even the tail end of our lifetime, will be completely revolutionary. I'm digressing from your comment, though, is think about these polarities, community, grassroots movements, the ordinary people coming together, large populations instead of the 99%. We are the 99%, we're not the 1%. But think about Leo and where Leo goes wrong. The individual goes wrong when it's run on narcissism. Look at how big my pissing contest is. Look at how big my Trump towers are. I have to put my name on everything, like a dog pisses on a fire hydrant. I'm claiming everything. I have to showcase who I am, how big I am. The Musks, the Bezos, they are the Leo archetypes. And right now they're completely misguided. They have no ethical foundation because they have been divorced from the other archetype. So the Buddha always said middle way. And how he said to get to the middle way is very interesting. He said, look at the extremes, find the extremes, and locate the shadow of the extreme. Then you will find your way to center by drawing out what good benefits there are from each, being an individual, being a sovereign agent, being self-empowered. Draw those out, but leave the narcissism behind, leave the insecurity behind. Find the group, what's good about the group, co-regulation, infectious ideas. Leave the social contagion out where we like re-traumatize each other in groups. Leave out the bullying. Leave out like the social media influencers. How many of you want to be the recipient of an influencer who's been paid off by a product to sell something to you? So I'm just presenting this as a way to get your own mind around it. We need these two things. They're the direction that we're going. How are we going to balance them? And how do you look at the shadow and try to really work with the shadow underneath all of them? Everything has a shadow. I can't emphasize that enough. Everything has a shadow. technology has a shadow, spirituality has a shadow, community has a shadow. It's up to us to figure out how to work with those energies, what's underneath it.
Yeah. Steiner called it love in action. Yeah. And it's an interesting thing. Like you say, everything's got a shadow. You know what? Before his death, Steiner wanted to dissolve the anthroposophic society that he'd created. And he wanted to preserve it for a key group of initiates. There were only 14.
Wow.
Out of thousands.
Wow.
So everything develops a shadow. So coming back, what did he say? That the last thing is virtue, yeah? That's where
He didn't want it religion. He didn't want it to become like a religion.
No. Absolutely not. Which it had almost become, and it still is. Yeah. Most of the anthroposophists I listen to are completely ostracized from the organization. Yeah. So yeah, really, because he was about, the community, but with people who are doing the work, who are doing the inner work. Yeah. And yeah, I would say.
And one of the inner work is vulnerability.
Part of it is owning.
That's what helps with the shadow of narcissism.
Yep.
Is making it almost a prerequisite that people learn how to be comfortable with vulnerability.
Yeah.
And be genuine.
Yeah. Beautiful. I think sorry. Oh, now we got a question online. That's great. Our first. Let's see. From Jonas Wolf.
Oh, hi, Jonas.
What are your suggestions on remembering our dharma or our purpose? Can we share the quote here, the Steiner quote just mentioned? Yeah, mungkin ada yang type di chat. Yeah, boleh diperlihatkan. Yeah. 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 Suggestions for finding or remembering our dharma.
Yeah. So this is where we avoid the top down. So rather than the guru at the top tells you what your dharma is, the new way of going about these things, like I come to your class and sit with you, and then you come to my class, and then one of our students becomes a teacher.
Yep.
And it's more mandala.
Yep.
But what's guiding all that is the inverse of the pyramid, that the external guru does the download and we are the student, the passive student, like a child listening. Yes, we need that, of course. Like, you will always be a student to your father. I'll always respect my teacher, Geshe Tenzin Zopa.
Yep.
But the idea that we're crossing into in the new civilization is to listen. It's the same voice that beckons you to call to adventure on the heroic journey, is the same voice that's going to tell you, I'm really interested in what that guy has to say. That methodology, that text, that tradition. The idea is that, again, there's a balance. The external teacher is just a mirror for something inside of us. And this is the age where we're awakening a basic sense of confidence in our own goodness, our own ability to navigate. And guess what? It's just like riding a bike. You were saying clairvoyance takes time. If you start this question, like, how do I know, with the underlying or implicit assumption, I don't want to fuck up, it doesn't ever work. The only way to get confidence in trusting your intuition is to allow yourself to follow it and suffer the consequences. So you may end up being wrong a few times. You may trust somebody that actually hurts you. You don't shut that process down. Learn from it. That's what the labyrinth is all about. That's what the journey is. Like, you touch the stove and you said, I'm never going to touch it again. I loved and I never want to love again. I trusted and I got betrayed and I never want to do it again. But then the question comes up, how do I know? If you're asking the question, how do I know, you're forgetting how learning happens, which is you keep turning yourself over to your intuition until it refines itself, until it becomes reliable. And that only happens through trial and error. So if you've been hurt, you get back on the horse and you learn you do enough analysis and enough healing to trust again, to trust again, to trust again, not outsource again, but trust again, trust again. So there's some connection between trusting yourself and learning from the hard knocks, which is part of the initiation. So it's a nice way of ending tonight because it reinforces this middle section, this initiatory process. Thank you, Jonas.
Thank you, Jonas. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Miles. Thank you, everybody. Yes.
How do you say thank you without saying thank you?
Suksama. And yeah, wishing you all the best and looking forward to our return.
Yes.
In February, date to be confirmed. There may also be some things that with this planetary parade, this cosmic galactic events happening on January 25th and later in March 20th. I'm going to check in with that and see, maybe we'll do something. Yeah.
I'm going to ask, how would you recommend to spend that day? Apart from all the recommendations.
Wow, of course, at my workshop.
Yeah, join Tjok in his workshop.
There's no other way to do it. You can
his planetary procession workshop on the 20th of March, and then
I would, if I wasn't at my workshop. Okay, no, I would be somewhere in nature. Let's say if I was going to do I'd be somewhere in the mountains in Bali.
would you
not maybe near the coast? I don't know, wherever calls you feel like you can see the sky.
Would you do Mulukat?
It would be very good to do Mulukat, and I may actually hold a Mulukat ceremony. I don't know where it will be though. It may actually be in the mountains. I might just get this calling and say we're going to Batu Karu or somewhere, I would be, first, if I lived in a city, I'd be out of the city. I'd be in nature somewhere. And it could be alone, it could be with other people. I feel like because it's going to be this lineup of all of these planets, and we have them all in us. You see, it's almost like an integration process of the Jupiter within us, the Mars within us, the Venus within us, the Saturn within us, and so on and so forth. What I will perhaps be doing is actually exploring those planets and talking about them and examining them, and then having a time at night to look at the sky and look at them, because we'll see them with the naked eye on that day, all lined up. Unless it's cloudy and rainy. That'll be a bummer. You don't get your money back though. But yeah, I would be really looking at ways. And again, there's maybe no fancy technique, but it's, how do I integrate Jupiter within myself? These power, etc. But being in a place where you have time to contemplate yourself as well. Yeah. Or maybe you want to go clubbing that night. I don't know. It's whatever. Like it'll be it'll be a life, because it's going to be a lot of people, a lot of commentators are saying it's a strong day for manifestation. So also looking at that, and the question from Jonas as well, what's my dharma? Think of those things that fill you with life, that things that you do where you feel this equal exchange. And it may be something completely out of, it may, not everyone has to be a healer. And dharma, I don't know. If you want to look at the term dharma in a profession, it can change as well. It's dynamic, yeah, because we're dynamic. There's only one constant in life, and that's change. That's the only thing we can bet our money on. What is it? Birth, death, and taxes. Birth, death, and taxes.
Yeah.
In Bali, we say sukha, dukkha, lara, pati. Joy, sorrow, suffering, and death. I think taxes is the suffering part, or maybe it's the sad part. I don't know. But yeah, I would be looking at that as well. What is because I think a lot of us are at a point now, like it's the initiation point threshold, is like, I think something's got to change. I think I want to change something. But then manifestation is actually easy. It's really easy to do. But what is it that you want to manifest? Really?
Just like the ancient civilizations that are popping up now.
Yeah.
The ancient civilization sites are almost bursting through the Amazon jungle, bursting through the deserts in southern Turkey.
Yep.
And just as people are looking or orienting themselves to Dharma or to wisdom traditions or to esoteric wisdom schools, just as they start popping up, just also know a lot of bullshit comes up too.
Yeah.
Cults are going to be off the hook. False prophecies are popping up.
Yeah.
They come together.
Yeah.
They come together.
Yeah.
So one of the other archetypes is not only decentralization of the Aquarian Leo, but it's also discernment.
Discernment.
Remember I said I fell prey to one of those AI technology, the Hollywood sign burning?
Yes.
So yeah, it's a good lesson. Like maybe I can't just see an image and respond right away.
It's interesting. That's one of the last messages from Sabdopalon in the prophecy. Yeah. This goes back to the ancient teachings. So one of the last things he said, and I actually want to make a t-shirt that says it, Eling dan waspada. That means remember and be cautious, i.e. have discernment. Yeah. It was one of the last messages. One of my teachers, he's always Eling lan waspada. Eling lan waspodo. You know. Yeah. Discernment. In the age of Aquarius, and then let's watch Hair. Remember that one? That's a good one. Yeah. Okay. I think it's dinner time. And yeah. Okay. I'll say thanks once again. Thank you, everyone, and Jonas for that wonderful last question. And yeah, it's always an honor and a privilege to walk the path with you, Miles, everybody. Yeah. Eling lan waspada. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.